All right, welcome to the EMT Pro podcast, where we deliver relevant EMS content from the field and the classroom each week. My name is Steve, and with me we have my co-host Dan. Dan, say hi.
Great to be here, Steve. Hello.
And just a reminder, each episode of this podcast can get you 1 full hour of CE through our partner, emt-ce.com. So head over there for more information. So Dan, today we have a bunch of COVID-related stuff to talk about because this is what we're dealing with.
Seems like that's all we talk about anymore.
Yeah. And it's been the key topic of conversation around the firehouse for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's getting kind of old.
Yeah, it's getting really old. How are your guys and gals handling it where you work?
You know, we're doing really well. We have a couple of people that have it, but the department itself has really taken the high ground on this. They've given us COVID leave, no questions asked. They have supplied the best PPE that they can find.
So when you say COVID leave, what is that?
That is
it like an additional bank?
Yeah, additional bank.
Okay.
So you get sick, your family member gets sick, something happens. It doesn't have to be COVID. Just They don't want you to come to work.
Yeah. And
so they're just trying to protect the masses. And it's really been a good thing. It's that extra security, which really helps.
So these aren't hours that are added to a sick or vacation bank. They just said, here's a new bank of hours.
Here's a new bank of hours.
If you get this thing, dip into it.
Yep. Wow. Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is a good thing. And then it's I don't know if you've ever responded to a disaster where you go to a foreign country, there's a natural disaster that happens and you get there and there's just mass destruction and everything's on the ground and people have died, but it's over, right? It's a done deal. Now it's happened. It's happened, right? Yeah. There's this sense of hope at that point in time. You go to the firehouse and it's just another day. Let's not get COVID.
Right.
Let's not.
Because it's happening.
It's happening and there's no end in sight.
Right.
Which is scary.
Yeah. I keep turning off the news as much as possible. I can't keep up with the amount of change that happens every single day and pretty much every hour. There's something else coming out. There's some new projection. Someone's doing something dumb somewhere in the country, or there's someone who is, relatively famous that now has it. And, they're telling their story, and it's just a rehashing of the same symptoms that we've been generally told these people have. Right.
And then you get the political part, where you have 10 guys or gals, and there's going to be different sides of the table that people sit on, right? And so you're trying to weave through that the entire time, not to step on any toes, but yet maintain a sense of it's going to be okay.
Because you've got people on one end of the spectrum who are like, this is dumb. We should have never closed anything. Just let this thin the herd. I've heard people say, which is the most rude thing you can think of. And then there's people who are like, we shouldn't even be looking at people. We should be sheltered in our houses, not moving,
It's both ends.
Yeah.
Question for you. Yeah. How has your response package, has it been altered at all?
It has. So things where we're at, we had some people who were kind of jumping the gun on our management saying, hey, are we going to tackle this? Because this is coming down the pipe. And I don't know if you guys are, getting anything spooled up, but we need to be thinking about this kind of stuff. And how's it going to change our daily operations? So we had some guys on the line who were really, proponents of getting this stuff out there early. And I think that actually helped us in the long run, because we had our managers basically say, we need to get the ball rolling on this. And so they got counts of our PPE done. We put in some orders early for stuff. So we had some stuff available. We didn't run out. And knock on wood, we haven't run out yet. We're getting donations, but we're moving those donations to the hospital if we do receive them. Because, we can get into this in a minute, man, but I get so tired of hearing or being compared to a nurse right now, or being compared to a doc who's treating COVID patients, because they have the toughest job and they are the front lines. And so, I get it. First responders, we're going on calls, and I don't want to downplay it. Across the country, we have EMS workers who've gotten it and have died. It's not something I'm downplaying, but I just don't even feel like I can be put in the same camp as a doctor or a nurse right now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's
And
insane.
or over on the East Coast, we can't be on the same.
Totally. Oh
We
my
are
gosh.
very fortunate right now.
Yeah. And I've actually got a story about that too. So just to give people a little bit of a breakdown what we got going on today, talk about COVID, obviously. And we want to talk about information that we have gotten from reputable sources. We're not going to talk about things that are, being discussed or, kind of going through the rumor mill, anything like that. And then we're going to talk about our mindsets around this and looking at the future of what this could, potentially affect. And then we've got a couple local stories to talk about. And then we've got a couple calls to discuss that are COVID related. So this is more of a historical type podcast than anything. It's not meant to be a podcast that's giving relevant information for what we end up finding out, 6 months from now, because
Right.
it's all coming out as we're living through it and working through it. So I guess first things first, let's talk about what we do know. Right now, as of today, looking across the country, looking at CDC's website, 865,000 total cases. We've got 48,000 total deaths. And looking at our state of Oregon, it looks like we have a little over 2,100 reported cases, and we're sandwiched in between Washington and California, which are suffering like horribly.
Right.
And our governor just recently announced that pact that says we're going to be working through the most strategic process to reopen things slowly. It sounds like they're going to be starting with the more rural counties that maybe haven't even had a case of COVID, or maybe one total.
Right.
And so interesting to see how this next month plays out for sure. You're just outside Portland where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So you're dealing with higher populations, more densely populated areas.
Right.
What are you seeing as kind of the major challenges that your department's facing as you respond on these calls?
Well, being such a bigger department, we act as a lot of smaller departments. You know what I mean by that? Like, this fire station is doing this fire station is doing that.
Okay.
Even though we have this direction,
Mm-hmm.
we all need to be doing the same thing. So if I work an overtime shift in another department, which is in another county or another city,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be doing the same stuff there that I'm doing where I work now.
Yeah.
And we're not finding that, because where I work right now, we get our Tyvek suit on,
Mm-hmm.
we get our P100 on.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is slowed.
What's a P100?
P100 is this really good respirator that goes on my SCBA mask.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, we look like spacemen walking to these
Right.
calls. We go to the call, and everything is super slow now. And we go to the call, and I won't even break the plane to the door. If the patient can walk out,
Mm-hmm.
we have the patient walk out. We limit exposure, so there's only 1 to 2 of us that even come in any contact with the patient.
Mm-hmm.
We'll stage the ambulance to see if we even need them. And a lot of the people were just, I'm sorry, you need to stay home.
Yeah.
You don't need to expose yourself or expose anyone else at the hospital. Just stay home, ride this out. If you need us, we're right up the street. We'll come right back, send you up.
Yeah.
And so our whole mindset has changed. So it's going to be a challenge to bounce back into
Right.
our routine.
Right.
But like we go into cardiac arrest, and our cardiac arrests have gone way up. Strokes have gone way up. I don't know if it's because people are stressed or they're not seeking medical attention when it's needed. Like cardiac arrest, we will go in our little spacesuits, grab the patient, put them on a mega mover, yard them outside, and work the entire code outside. Just because we have 10 to 12 people that are going to be there, and
Right.
just lessens exposure.
Man.
And so we're intubating outside in our SCBAs, and it's just a different world.
Yeah. It's super strange. We're definitely doing the same thing where we show up, and we even have dispatch a lot of times asking the patient if they can go outside just to wait for us. But we've had multiple calls where we show up, we've got, these symptoms that are, the ones we're looking for, right? And we walk in, we hit the plane of the door, and then if we can make contact with them, hey, I know this is a weird thing, but you got to come outside.
Yep.
Let us take a look at you, even if it's 2 a.m. and it's cold. Grab a blanket. We'll do our assessment out here on your front doorstep.
Right.
One of the things that I wanted to discuss before we kind of get into some of the calls or a couple of the recent things that have happened that we wanted to chat about. I really have been looking at how this is going to change our mindsets as an industry. And I think it's really going to change from the ground up. People in class are going to learn it a new way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to see a total new tide, the way we look at infectious diseases, the way we look at going on cardiac arrest calls, the way that we look at exposure to a lot of the nastiness that humans have, virus-wise and disease-wise. The thing that I've been thinking about lately is those specific mindsets. So we've heard of the story of Cruz and Kirkland, who, when this was all kind of starting and nobody really had a plan in place yet, they go on a cardiac arrest of a COVID patient, and they had, I think it was 8 to 10 people got exposed on that single call, and they all came down with symptoms. So they had to go into quarantine and everything. Those types of things we never thought about 6 months ago.
Not at all.
I mean, not even really 2 or 3 months ago. What are the new PPE mandates going to be at our department, at our state level, in the classroom level when people are learning this stuff? Is ACLS going to change? Because you have your iPro and your gloves on, but is it going to be requiring a mask now too? Is it going to be requiring a gown? Are you going to have to wear stuff to cover your feet? Like all sorts of weird changes that we've never really thought about implementing. But I think in a lot of ways, that can be a good thing too.
Absolutely a good thing.
It's stuff we've needed to do, but we've been so dinosaur-like. I'm a seasoned that or the other, and I'm good to go. I can walk in and handle this.
Let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
When I first started this whole job back in the early 90s, it was, we were right there in the AIDS epidemic, and I remember transporting a patient. I can still see his face. I can still remember his name. And I was in this full Tyvek suit, this huge mask, gloves, goggles, and I was just taking him home to die. Mm-hmm. And I remember him looking at me like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you this by just laying here.
Yeah.
And that has stuck with me, and I think that is why my usage of PPE has gone way, way down over the years. I mean, I have the reputation of the department not wearing the gloves unless there's, poop or lots of blood or whatever. Right? And so this has really reset how I think about it, because I've been really, really lucky.
Yeah. No kidding, right?
It's really lucky.
Yeah. And you think about, the things that COVID is putting on the map is things like infection rates. Like never really thought in my brain, and I went through a good program. I've taken good courses on, from smart people on infectious diseases and, various pandemics. And I never really grasped the idea of, oh, hey, this is a more infectious virus. This virus, they're saying, is more contagious than the typical seasonal flu. Mm-hmm. And if my chances of catching the flu from a patient I was treating without this gear on is, 1x, with COVID, it might be 2 or 3x. And so it's those types of data points that I think are really going to help swing our industry into something else. And I'm excited to see what that ends up being. I think that will overall keep us more safe. I think it will overall allow us to keep people, around longer and not get sick and not spread disease. Because as I'm sure you recall, with SARS and a couple of these other major diseases that have come out in the last 20 to 50 years, EMS has been a vector for those things. So they're transporting patients, not taking the proper PPE, and they're spreading it unknowingly.
Right.
I think the more that we can learn about this stuff, the better the decisions we will make because of that education. And so I'm really hopeful that this will end up being a good thing for us.
Do you think that what happened in Kirkland early on with those guys helped us as a whole?
Absolutely.
Because it shows what can happen.
It's our neighboring state.
Right.
And I mean, I know people that work for that department,
right.
And I know that I have a lot of friends and colleagues who have connections up there. And so that event really helped, I would say, the Northwest get their butt in gear.
Yes.
And take this thing seriously.
And I'm sure it saved some lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we can only guess what the trickle-down effect of that education was, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, changing our mindsets, changing our preconceived notions walking into a call. Yeah, this person doesn't have priority-like symptoms of a COVID or a flu-like illness. let's just be smart and walk in with the right stuff on, so that if we come across someone in the house that has that, we're not hit with a situation where we have to back out. One of the Dan and I are two very different spots in our careers. I'm 13 years in. Dan's technically
Almost
Dan, almost dead. You've technically retired, and you're working back for a little bit,
Right.
With your current department, which is an awesome option that you've been given, which I know is kind of popular in the Northwest. I don't think it's very popular across the country.
Right. I don't think so.
The reason I bring that up is in regards to PPE, I remember just being kind of scared into always have your PPE on in class. That really stuck with me, and it saved my butt on one call, and it saved my crew's butt on one call. And we got dispatched to a person down call, and so we're heading there, lights and sirens, and then we get some updated information en route. And we're talking a half mile from our station, really close.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out, it's a teenager, and he can't move, and he's on the floor, no trauma. And so we're like, man, what the heck is going on? That just, either dispatch wrote something in the notes
Right.
wrong, they heard something wrong on the phone call. Like, we can't be going to that, because that just doesn't make any sense. And so, you talk about spidey senses all the time, right? My spidey senses were going through the roof on that call. And I said, you know what, guys, before we head in there, let's just throw everything on. And they're like, what, like gloves? And I go, no, like everything, like a gown, eye pro, a mask, and put some gloves on. And they were like, I don't think they'd ever at this point done this in their career ever. And at that point I had a 25-year lieutenant with me, and the engineer was 7 or 8 years my senior. And these guys are like, dude, I don't know what you're thinking, but like, no, like you go do your thing, and we'll be right behind you, right? So roll in, and I'm walking up to this kid, and he's laying on his back. I can still see his face. He just looked so scared and so hopeless. Like, he was just like, I don't know what's happening to me, but this isn't right. And his parents are freaking out. He can't move. He doesn't know why he can't control his body. And he's just laid out on the floor, right? Well, my two guys behind me see the look in his face, and they go, hey, Steve, we'll be right back. And they come back in with all their gear on, right? Well, fast forward through the call. The kid had a 104 plus degree fever. His pressure was low. He felt and looked like crap. And he ended up having advanced bacterial meningitis.
Oh my.
And so he ended up losing limbs. And we had doctor after doctor after nurse calling us to verify the amount of time that we were exposed to him, because they were very, very worried about our proximity to him. And they had to, quarantine his family who lived with him. And he had a relatively large family that he lived with. Right. And so it was freaky, man. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I know that call changed the way that I look at these types of calls. And those two guys that went with me.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah. They talk about that to this day. Steve's just got this feeling that we need to do this, Yeah. To go back to your original question, man, it's changed everything about what we do. And it's also rendered us down to what we were really signing up to the job to do, right? Here we are treating critical patients. Here we are, we're still going on house fires. We're still going on, smoke alarms and fire investigations and all that kind of stuff. But we've really rendered down to what I would have always assumed the fire department and ambulances do across the country, right? Like, we still treat EMS patients. We still, are doing training, but it's all about containing this outbreak right now. And
have you found, has your call volume decreased?
Our call volume in certain areas has decreased. Depends on the district.
Right.
Yeah.
Same here, but overall it's decreased.
Yes.
And that is one thing I wonder is if this will hold on, that the people realize, if I don't need to call 911, I can help myself. Mm-hmm. That would be a good thing.
Right.
If people are starting to.
Our country could definitely benefit from that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a really good segue. The last interesting thing that I want to bring up or chat about is I'm sitting down. It's 9 o'clock at night. My wife and I are watching a movie. Kids are down, and we're just having a chill moment in the middle of. I think we're actually watching Homeland. I don't know if you ever watched that show.
I love Homeland,
dude.
It's the best.
I think that's our favorite show, between the two of us. And I get this phone call from my wife's friend, and she lives in New York. She's living there with her girlfriend, and her girlfriend's mom lives in New York as well. And she's not feeling well. She actually texts my wife's friend and says, I think I might be having a heart attack. So everybody's sheltered in place there, right?
Right.
They go hauling, down to, a few blocks to her girlfriend's mom's apartment. And she's got chest pain. She's short of breath. She doesn't look good. She's been feeling this way for a couple hours. She's obviously freaked out, right? She doesn't want to call 911. And she doesn't want to go to the ER,
right,
because she doesn't want to expose herself, right? What do? They call Steve, because
across the country.
We know one of these paramedics somewhere across the country. Yeah. Oh, we know Steve. So I get this phone call, interrupts this, really nice,
night at home with the wife.
Chill night at home with the wife that we're having. And she goes, hey, so sorry to do this to you, which is like the best way to start a phone call, right? But I'm here with my girlfriend's mom, and she's not looking good. Here's what she's going through. And there's a little bit of a language barrier as well. And so they end up calling 911 because, what am I going to do, right?
Exactly.
Even if I had all the equipment with me,
right,
it's not going to do me any good across the country, right? I'm at home. I'm taking this in, and I said, friend, you gotta get someone there if you don't want to take her in. I understand this is a really tough call, but we're talking about potential heart muscle and a quick death versus getting some help and potentially exposing yourself to something. And we had to weigh the benefits and pros and cons, so to speak. So ambulance gets there, and she calls me back about, I don't know, it took like 30 minutes to get an ambulance there.
Yeah.
And so she calls me again, and she hands the phone to the EMS provider on scene. And I go, hey, I'm Steve, kind of giving them my background. I go, what's 12 lead show? And this poor person, she goes, sir, I'm an EMT. If you want an ALS rig in this town right now, you're talking 4 to 5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
That's how slammed that system has been, man. And I don't want to act like I know anything about what New York's going through, because I don't.
Right.
But they are next level up there, man. Like they're doing things across their city that no EMS provider was ever asked to do ever before. And I can't imagine what it's like getting up every day, going to work in that situation, and existing in that call volume environment.
Oh, that would be horrible.
This was weeks ago, and I'd heard that their call volume doubled.
Right.
Not a small amount of calls.
No.
And my wife's friend is telling me the two major things she hears at night are the 7 p.m. Clap for those on the front lines,
right,
and say thanks. And then the second thing is it's nonstop, just sirens back and forth,
all the time,
back and forth the whole night. So if you are on the East Coast, if you're in New York and you're listening to this, just know that you have all of our respect and admiration right now. And we got your back in whatever way we can,
absolutely.
Good vibes, thoughts, prayers, they're headed your way. And you guys are definitely on our minds a lot as you guys battle all that stuff going on. So thank you for what you're doing.
So what happened?
Yeah. So I guess that's the crazy thing. So she goes in, she gets checked out, and she gets diagnosed with COVID. They do a test, and they have a rapid test that they tested her with, right away, and it came back positive. So, and I don't know the details on the specific test she got or anything, but overall, what I've heard is there's about a 75% accuracy rate with those, and so there's 25%, potential false positive, false negative. Well, she was given a false positive test. So she got the one where, I don't know who makes it or what the test is, but 24 to 36 hours later, she gets it back from a lab and they go, you tested positive initially, but you do not have COVID. You need to go basically quarantine for 14 days at your house. And this has been over 14 days. So she's doing well.
Good.
But yeah, she went and got the help she needed. Wasn't having an active MI, thank God.
Good.
But she was having some respiratory related problems, and it sounds like just the anxiety of everything heightened everything she was experiencing, right? And the stress.
Amazing.
It's crazy what that stuff does to our bodies, man. So Dan, let's move into the call that you have, and we'll see where we are. We'll see where we're at with time. I have more of Dan has a legit call. I have an actual story about a call that goes more into the way that it was handled, not necessarily patient presentation and all that kind of stuff. So, but let's dive into what you had. And so I guess let's just start off with, what were you dispatched to?
We were dispatched to, it was middle of the night, we're dispatched to a breathing problem at one of the care centers that we have over there. We have quite a few, my first two. Yeah. And so automatically, we're thinking, oh, okay, we're getting ready for COVID, right?
Right.
So we're dispatched to a 68-year-old female with shortness of breath.
Okay.
And so initially there's things that go on before we even get there. There's a phone call made by the officer. Is the patient good enough that they can meet us on the loading dock? That type of stuff, where you can wheel them out to the loading dock, because some of our care homes do that.
What's a loading dock in a nursing home?
Like the I don't know. Where do we get into that?
Yeah. So like, are you talking about like where they receive their shipments and stuff? Or are you talking
exactly?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this patient was not well enough to do that. So this is before I had the P100, so I'm in SCBA. Okay,
so you're going in like this is a house fire.
Exactly.
Well, Tyvek suit.
A Tyvek suit, SCBA.
Okay.
Hooded, the whole bit.
Yeah.
And initially just two of us went in.
Okay.
And so the two, we have a tiller truck, so the two engineers, you know how those guys are.
Right.
They just want to sit in the cab anyway.
Yeah. Look cool.
And so they're hanging out.
Right.
But they're all dressed ready to go. So we go in, and luckily we're not too far into the building, and I could hear her work of breathing just down the hallway. And so I had the officer have them call, bring the other guys in.
Yeah.
The ambulance is still several minutes out. It's a busy night. So we go in, and the patient just looks horrible. Mm-hmm. She's flushed. She has a fever, and she's short of breath. She came on, this is one of those places where they tried the nasal cannula for a couple hours, and so she's 72%. Sats at nasal cannula at 2. So she's not doing well. She's very feverish. Listen lung sounds. So she's very diminished in the right lower.
Okay.
And so had been no diagnosis of pneumonia or anything like that, but they had been so busy, and there's a language barrier at the place anyway. So, so we go into the mode like we go into the mode all the time. This is several weeks back. Like, okay, we're gonna do this patient.
Yeah.
So we knew that we're not going to do any neb treatments. I didn't want to bag the patient because of the aerosolizing stuff.
Right.
And so.
But just real quick, you're saying you're going to innovate, and I think one of the things that we do, at least in the Northwest that I know, which forgive me my ignorance, I'm not sure what the things that people are the trigger points for innovation.
Right.
But the two things that we look at every single time: failure to oxygenate, failure to ventilate.
Correct.
Yep. If you can't do those two things, it doesn't really matter anything else. We got to take over those things for you, because if it's not bad enough, things are going to get really bad really quick.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, we put high flow on. Mm-hmm. All I'm thinking about is, okay, I want to take our airway, but yet I want to protect our people. And and so I'm thinking, we're going to take this airway as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So I'm in my SCBA. We get line established. We're going through, the ambulance had arrived by then. Mm-hmm. So we've got, we're pre-oxygenating as much as we can with nasal cannula and a non-rebreather, both going at 15 liters per minute. Mm-hmm. Sats top out at 84%. So I know that it's going to be a quick on that downhill slide of the, what's that thing called? The The
Dan's
oxygenation.
trying to show
I'm
me
sorry,
what he's got
30
with his
years
hand
old.
right now.
I didn't go to
You're
the.
making a graph?
I think so. I should
So-
try to act smart when I don't have it right behind
Right.
me.
So you're talking about the
The
downhill slide.
desaturation curve.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Well, we know, oxyhemoglobin curve.
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
See,
yeah,
that's why you're 5-star. I'm only 4-star.
We'll get into that in another episode about why Dan calls me 5-star. But so you're talking about oxyhemoglobin curve and basically the reliability of that curve at certain levels, which it's basically not super reliable from our finger probes after about 90%.
Exactly.
Because it's worse than it probably is showing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
If we
I
got
know.
72 or 84, we're
Right.
like, yeah, okay.
Right.
We're behind the curve. Yeah. No
And
pun
so
intended.
I know she's going to plummet. So
Yeah.
we don't have rock. I would have used rock as opposed to socks because
Rock uranium.
rock uranium.
Yeah.
So I didn't take all of their, her oxygen stores. So we pre-oxygenate as much as we can. I lay out the plan. I lay out I'm going to give it one shot. If it doesn't work, I can put the eye gel in.
Okay. So we got to hang on. We got to talk about eye gels real quick.
Oh, sorry.
Because they're new
They're new.
and they're awesome.
Right.
I mean, we're not inflating anything.
Right.
There's no balloon. It's not a single or dual lumen airway device. It's basically a LMA.
Yep. LMA
But it's got this gel
that adheres to the
Yeah.
glottic opening.
And so the gel is really firm when you take it out of the package, but when it goes into the oropharynx, it warms up because of the airway's temperature.
Yep.
And it creates a seal
Yep.
around the entrance of the glottic opening, right?
Right.
They're super cool, and we're not sponsored by iGel, but maybe we should look into that right now. Yeah, I mean they're a really cool tool, and they're quick and
Real quick.
They're awesome.
And one day they'll be that type of device will be first out for cardiac arrest.
I mean they're quickly becoming that initial go-to backup airway device.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
No
keep interrupting
problem,
you,
sir.
but you got all these hot topics that you bring up.
So I have everything out. We've communicated the plan. We're running down our checklist. And I say, I'm going to pull out. If I get to 82%, I'm going to pull out. So we have a monitor technician that looks at nothing but the monitor during my intubation attempt. Otherwise, I will plummet down into the 60s and get that tube, right? I mean, it's all pride.
We're not supposed to admit that. So you're only giving yourself a 2% window.
What's that?
You're only giving yourself a 2%
Am
window.
I 84? I thought
You said 84 and you were going to go to 82.
82. Oh, no, 80. Because I was giving myself 4.
Oh, okay. So
I didn't want to go in the 70s.
Okay. So you know that you're already low enough.
Yep.
You don't want to continue to go any lower.
Right.
And if we're honest, the second you stop oxygenating that patient, you probably have 5 seconds, 10 seconds before you start noticing a rapid decline again.
Right.
Yeah.
And luckily we have video laryngoscopes. So I had that all set up.
All the tricks. And
It's all going to be the preloaded bougie. I was all set and ready to go.
You said preloaded bougie, Dan. Again,
Sorry.
you got all these cool things we got to talk about. So a preloaded bougie is
Where you have your endotracheal tube. It runs over the bougie, which I know is a trade name, but
right.
runs over the bougie, and so it's just one pass. It's a single provider can use that. I just pass it in and then I slide it through.
Okay.
It's not something that you do if this is my first intubation. I'm gonna do a preloaded bougie. So you need to start with just the bougie.
Yeah.
But I just need to speed things up.
Right.
And so we had the BVM with PEEP on and a great 2-person, 2 thumbs down hand seal, so there's no leakage of germs and such out. But remember, we're doing all this in SCBAs and these masks. So communication is super poor.
Okay. Yeah. How was your visibility? Were you getting foggy masks?
No.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I was lucky on that.
Yeah.
So push the drugs, good seal with the PEEP. And so we maintain SATs. And as soon as he let go of that and I entered the mouth, I didn't get 2 inches in there before those SATs were down to 80%.
Yeah.
And so pulled out, stuck the eye gel in. The officer says, you know what? we're only a couple miles away from the hospital. We could just do it up there.
Let's just
And that's what a BLS officer gets you, right?
right.
Common sense.
Yeah, common sense. Yeah. We give them so much crap, but they save our butts with those words of just wisdom in the moment.
Right.
Where
Maybe
like,
he just wants to go back to bed, but still, it's
Right.
the smartest thing. The whole point of this is if I had that same call today, I would put that P valve on, I would put the mask on, hold that seal, transport to the hospital.
Yeah.
Because patient ended up, we had the eye gel in, was put on a ventilator, and died.
Yeah.
Probably would have died anyway, right? But
probably.
But with all the new studies coming out, don't intubate your patient early.
Right.
Let's see if they can self-prone.
Right.
Move the lung stuff around. And that's stuff that's just come out in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so now I do a double take on whether or not I should intubate these shortness of breath patients. Cardiac arrest. COVID or not.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So luckily for me, I mean, I had a good crew. We had a good plan. Unfortunately for the patient died.
Yeah.
But
and I think that's kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. Like, this is changing so much of what we're doing, and it's going to be really interesting to see what sticks after this goes away.
Hopefully it's the good stuff.
And I hope it's the good stuff. So one of the things that we've had our medical director do is he's obviously had to, like every medical director in EMS, create some sort of tweak to how we do things to facilitate treating these patients, right? And so we're being told absolute last case scenario intubate. Don't do it early like we usually like to do,
right?
To just be done with it and be managing it and check that box, so to speak. And then if we have to basically put off any aerosolized medications, if at all possible.
Are you using epi as opposed?
We're using epi. We're using oh, you mean in place of a duoneb or something like that?
Yeah. So not aerosol, but IM epi.
Yeah. So it's an option.
Right.
So we've expanded some room there for that, but they're not letting us, or they're saying basically don't give a neb unless you have to.
Right.
And if you have to, limit the people around it. And if you're going to withhold a neb, call us and let us know what we need to have ready, so that when you show up, bam, 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 we've got the next 3 steps ready to go right now. It's interesting times, man.
Yes.
Very interesting times. One of the things that we can't not talk about with this stuff is the way that medical providers and, basically us in the fire service and EMS service are being quarantined. A colleague of mine that I know went on a patient who they suspected had COVID. And he said, when I walked in the room, Steve, I looked at this guy, and he was an elderly gentleman. I just thought he was dead. He was gray. He looked horrible. And he lived by himself. Family hadn't seen him or heard from him for a couple of days, so they called for a welfare check. And the cops, knocked on the door, broke in, noticed he wasn't doing well, and called us. So that's kind of the general gist of the call that they get sent to. They walk in and they, do a quick, shoulder shake as they're walking up to him, and the guy kind of arouses a little bit, and they were stunned. Like, they would have put $20 on the fact this guy had no pulse. Ambulance crew, engine crew show up, and engine crew, this was, and I should probably said this sooner. This was right when this was starting and coming out, and hey, we should probably be putting on more PPE than we do on most calls. And so, engine company shows up with masks and gloves on. So it's more than normal, right? But it's definitely not
not up to our standard now.
The new standard, right? So no iPro, no gowns, and they're helping yard this guy off the bed onto the cot. Who knows the viral load that they're kicking up in the fabrics and in this room. And so the paramedic that my buddy who's telling me the story that was treating the patient, had the wherewithal to call the doc and say, hey, man, this guy's got all the telltale signs. And the doc that he spoke to said, basically, limit your exposure, but put everything on in the back of the ambulance, give him a neb treatment, and then just get him up here quick. And I'm going to get everything ready. We'll intubate him in a controlled environment up here. So the engine company, though, this guy ends up, being admitted to the hospital. He does have COVID. He does get tested positive, and he does go to the ICU. He ends up recovering.
Oh, good.
So he gets sent home. Did have to be on a ventilator for a period of time. Scary stuff. But the engine company has to go and basically decide what level of quarantine you want, because they were exposed to who knows, how much of a viral load with this patient without all the gear on. So no iPro and no gown. They did have a mask on, which, in a legit like N95 mask. We're not talking the
Right, good.
The cloth
Procedure
mask.
right.
Yeah. And so I know one of the guys who gets quarantined, and I'm talking to him every few days. He and I are friends, and I'm just getting the kind of the play-by-play from him. He decided to self-isolate at home. He has a 2-story house, so he has a wife and kids, and they just kind of left him alone. And I mean, we're talking like putting food, like at the end of the hallway, and then like, okay, food's here. And then he has to like walk up and pick it up. Like he did that for 2 weeks, and he ended up not catching anything. He had to get a test after a couple of weeks, but he had 2 negative tests, and they did everything they were supposed to do based off of what we know now, right? Or knew at the time. But I guess I'm curious what his quarantine looked like for you, and what options are available. And
so
it seems like it's different everywhere.
It is different. And our department has done the same thing. They have places set aside. So if our fire station, if we have 2 or more that get contaminated people, they will shut the fire station down and then move those people somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
And so they have other places that they have just for the employees, just like your place, where they will send the employee there for 2 weeks, which I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't imagine 2 weeks. I don't know what I'd do. I mean,
in a lot of ways, it kind of sounds like a vacation.
It does.
I mean,
can you imagine the Netflix?
I think I get sick of crushing Netflix that much, though. Gosh. I've never tried it.
I haven't either. I'd much rather send my family away and then just have the house to myself, work outside, and go exercise and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are some people in our department that actually park their travel trailers outside. They have at-risk people in their house.
Okay.
Asthma patient, kids or whatever.
Yeah.
So they just go to work, they come back, and they sleep in the trailer.
Oh, wow.
So that's without any exposure. That's just precautionary.
Yeah.
Which would be...
That's pretty smart, actually.
That is really
I like
smart.
that option a lot.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have that available to them, but I mean,
no.
That's pretty cool if you do. So Dan, I think that's all we've got for this episode, man. But I guess I just want to leave people with, I think the best thing I've heard was from an elderly person in my neighborhood. And she said, she's old, man. I mean, she's in her mid-90s. And she was telling me the other day of all the stuff she's lived through, right? She still gardens and gets around. Like, she's just one of those all-stars, right? And she's telling me she's lived through world wars. She's lived through all sorts of crises, all sorts of economic unknowns and downturns. And she just reminded me that this too shall pass, and our country will be better for it in the end, and we'll be smarter for it. And we're going to make good, educated decisions as a whole based off of this. She said, don't do anything more than today. She said,
man,
you're only guaranteed today. Tomorrow's never been guaranteed, no matter how you've lived your life up until now. Whether you have COVID or you don't, you only have today. And don't live your life worried about tomorrow, next week, next month. Focus on what's in front of you. Focus on your family, your loved ones, your friends. And if you can keep your mind occupied with the good in your life, she said, you're going to come out the other end just fine.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, oh my God.
I hope that's on the quiz, because that is great information.
I know, right? That really helped, especially in the early weeks of this, a month or so ago, plus, all the unknowns, and everything's, even crazier at that point. It really helped put me in a good mental framework.
Good.
And I
feel this is good for our kids. My kids, my wife's going crazy. She's going to make the national news here pretty soon. but they're 22, 20, and 17.
Right.
But this has been good for them because it's brought our family closer together.
Yeah.
And it's also made them realize that, it's not always hunky dory.
Yeah.
Bad things happen, but this is how you get through it.
Mm-hmm. And you gotta celebrate the good days, man. When things are going well, it's so easy to take it for granted. Oh, I got another good one coming tomorrow. And it's like, man, sit on today and enjoy it, and just marinate on the good people you have around you. There's so much to be thankful for in this season. So we'll leave you with that. So thanks for listening. We're going to bring you more episodes. This was kind of obviously a break from our scheduled, regularly planned episodes where we talk about classroom stuff and we talk about a couple of scenarios and we move on. But we felt it was really necessary to talk about this major event that's drastically affecting our industry. So we hope you learned something, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.